The billionaire stopped the moment he saw her. Lily Carter was barefoot, lost, and arguing with security in the private section of his luxury resort, with a camera around her neck and absolutely no idea that the handsome stranger watching her was Alexander Hayes, the billionaire who owned everything around her. Alexander had spent years believing love at first sight was something invented for movies, but within seconds, one look at Lily changed everything. She was only a wedding photographer trying desperately to find her way back to the ceremony, and by tomorrow morning, she expected to be gone from his life forever. But Alexander was already canceling his flight just to stay near her. What neither of them knew was that Lily had brought an old photograph to the resort, a photograph taken 23 years earlier. And when Alexander finally saw the man standing beside Lily's mother in that picture, the color drained from his face. It was his father. The first time billionaire resort owner Alexander Hayes saw Lily Carter, she was standing barefoot beside his private infinity pool, holding a broken high heel in one hand and arguing with a security guard who was threatening to escort her from the property. Alexander stopped halfway down the marble staircase overlooking the Pacific Ocean and stared at the stranger who had somehow wandered into the most restricted section of Hayes Crown Resort. She looked nothing like the polished women who usually surrounded him. Her pale blue dress was wrinkled from hours of work, dark strands of hair had escaped her loose bun, and a heavy camera hung around her neck. "I am the wedding photographer," Lily insisted. "The coordinator told me to follow the garden path." She neglected to mention there are approximately 12 garden paths. "This area is private, ma'am," the guard replied. "Yes, I figured that out when you started treating me like I was stealing state secrets." Alexander almost smiled. Then Lily turned and saw him. Their eyes met across the pool, and something inside Alexander went completely still. At 40 years old, he had built an international hospitality empire, negotiated billion-dollar deals, and dated women whose photographs appeared on magazine covers. He had never believed in love at first sight. Until that moment, Lily, unfortunately, appeared considerably less impressed. She looked at his black suit and commanding expression. "Please tell me you are the manager." The security guard nearly choked. Alexander descended the remaining stairs. "Something like that." Lily held up her broken shoe. "Then your resort needs better signs. You are standing on my private terrace. Because your signs are terrible." Alexander stopped in front of her. "What is your name?" "Why? I like knowing who is insulting my property." The guard cleared his throat. "Ma'am, this is Mr. Alexander Hayes." Lily blinked. "Hayes? As in Hayes Crown Hotels?" "Yes. You own this place?" "Among others." Lily closed her eyes briefly. "Of course you do." Alexander expected embarrassment. Instead, she pointed toward the gardens. "Could the billionaire who owns approximately 12 confusing garden paths please tell me how to get back to the wedding?" Alexander laughed. "I will show you." They walked together, Lily carrying her broken shoe while Alexander found himself asking questions he normally left to assistants. She was 30 years old, worked independently, and had driven 6 hours to photograph the wedding because the original photographer had canceled. When they reached the pavilion, Lily immediately returned to work. She did not ask for his number. She did not mention his money. She barely said goodbye. Alexander stood watching her photograph the bride beneath strings of golden lights. His assistant Daniel Reed approached. "Your helicopter leaves in 20 minutes. Cancel it." Daniel stared at him. "You have a board meeting in Los Angeles. Move it." "Why?" Alexander's eyes remained on Lily. "Find out how long the wedding photographer is staying." Daniel followed his gaze and understood enough not to ask another question. Across the pavilion, Lily opened her equipment bag to replace a memory card. Beneath the camera batteries was an old photograph she had carried since her mother died. It showed her mother standing at this same resort 23 years earlier, when the property had been a struggling family hotel called Seabrook Lodge. Beside her stood a handsome man Lily had never been able to identify. On the back her mother had written only 4 words. "He changed our lives forever." Lily had accepted the wedding assignment partly because she hoped the old building records might finally tell her who he was. She had no idea Alexander Hayes knew that face better than anyone. The mysterious man in the photograph was his father. By 10 that evening, The wedding had moved from the oceanfront pavilion into the grand ballroom, but Alexander still had not left the resort. He told himself there were legitimate business reasons to stay. A plumbing renovation needed approval. A supplier contract required review. The general manager wanted to discuss winter bookings. None of those explanations accounted for the fact that Alexander had walked past the ballroom 4 times in 40 minutes. Lily noticed him on the 5th. Do billionaires usually patrol their own hallways? She asked while changing lenses near the entrance. Only when photographers criticize the signage. I knew you were holding a grudge. I am extremely sensitive. Lily smiled despite herself. Alexander noticed how different that smile was from the careful expressions people usually gave him. Have you eaten? He asked. Does half a wedding cupcake count? No, then no. 10 minutes later, a plate appeared beside her equipment bag. Lily looked toward Alexander. Did you order this? I have no idea what you are talking about. You own the kitchen. Circumstantial evidence. She shook her head but ate between photographs. Shortly before midnight, the reception ended. Lily packed her equipment while guests disappeared toward elevators and waiting cars. She had booked a cheap motel several miles away. But when she checked her phone, she discovered the coastal highway had been closed because of a mudslide caused by heavy rain. Perfect, she whispered. Problem? Alexander asked behind her. Do you appear every time my evening gets worse? Apparently. When he learned about the road closure, he offered her a room. Lily immediately refused. I cannot afford this hotel. I did not ask you to pay. That is worse. Alexander frowned. Why? Because free things from powerful men usually become expensive later. The sentence struck him harder than she intended. No conditions, he said. 1 room. 1 night. You leave when the road opens. Lily studied him before reluctantly accepting. At the front desk, Alexander instructed the manager to give her a standard guest room, not a luxury suite. He was beginning to understand that extravagant gestures made her suspicious. Lily turned to thank him, but her equipment bag slipped from her shoulder. The zipper, left partially open, caught against the counter. Batteries, cables, memory cards, and photographs spilled across the marble floor. Alexander crouched to help. Then he stopped. An old photograph lay beside his hand. His father's face stared back at him from 23 years earlier. Richard Hayes was standing beside a young woman Alexander did not recognize. Alexander picked it up slowly. Where did you get this? Lily heard the sudden change in his voice. That belongs to me. Who is this woman? My mother. Alexander looked from the photograph to Lily. The resemblance was unmistakable. And the man? She asked. He remained silent. Lily's expression tightened. You know him. Alexander turned the photograph over and saw the handwriting. He changed our lives forever. His stomach dropped. Alexander, who is he? He finally looked at her. My father. Lily stared at him. That is impossible. His name was Richard Hayes. My mother never knew anyone named Hayes. Apparently she did. Lily took the photograph from him. Why would your father be here with my mother? Alexander looked toward the old wing of the resort, the only section preserved from Seabrook Lodge. A memory surfaced from childhood. His father returning from California unexpectedly, refusing to explain where he had been, then making a mysterious payment months later. Alexander had forgotten it until now. I do not know, he said. For the first time that night, Lily saw fear in the billionaire's eyes. But I think we need to find out. The next morning, the highway remained closed, but neither Lily nor Alexander mentioned leaving. Instead, they stood in the resort's administrative archives surrounded by boxes of documents dating back decades. Hayes Crown Resort had once been Seabrook Lodge, a modest coastal hotel purchased by Richard Hayes 22 years earlier, 1 year after Lily's photograph was taken. My mother worked here, Lily said, examining an old employee ledger. At least that is what my aunt told me. Alexander opened another file. What did she do? Housekeeping, reception, whatever they needed. She was 22 and broke. And your father? Lily hesitated. I never knew him. Alexander looked up. Never. My mother raised me alone. She said my father left before I was born. The possibility entered the room before either of them voiced it. Lily saw it in Alexander's expression and immediately shook her head. Do not. I did not say anything. Your face did. The dates. Your father is not my father. Alexander closed the file. I was going to say the dates make whatever happened between our families important. Lily stared at him, embarrassed. Right. Although your interpretation was considerably more dramatic. You are enjoying this. A little. Their search eventually led to the former Seabrook manager, an 84-year-old man named Walter Quinn who lived nearby. Alexander arranged a video call. The moment Walter saw Lily, he became silent. You look exactly like Anna, he said. Lily leaned toward the screen. You knew my mother? Everyone knew Anna Carter. She worked harder than anyone there. Alexander showed him the photograph. Walter's expression changed. Where did you find that? Lily's mother kept it. Then perhaps she wanted Lily to know eventually. Know what? Lily asked. Walter looked toward Alexander. Your father saved that woman's life. Lily froze. Walter explained that Anna had been working at Seabrook when she discovered the hotel's owner was secretly taking money from employees' retirement accounts to cover gambling debts. Anna intended to report him. The owner threatened her and accused her of stealing from the hotel. Richard Hayes, then a young investor staying at Seabrook, believed Anna and helped gather evidence. The owner was eventually prosecuted, and Richard purchased the failing property. Why did my mother never tell me? Lily asked. Because there was another part. Walter's voice softened. Richard gave Anna enough money to leave California and start over. She refused at first, but he convinced her. Alexander frowned. My father barely gave money to charities without contracts. Walter smiled sadly. Richard was different before your mother died, Alexander. The word struck him. What does my mother have to do with this? Walter hesitated. That is not my story to tell. Before Alexander could press him, Walter gave them one final clue. There was a room in the old East Wing. Richard used it as an office while he was buying Seabrook. Room 214. After the renovation, he ordered that nobody ever touch it. Alexander had never heard of Room 214. The general manager confirmed it still existed behind a sealed corridor used for storage. An hour later, Alexander unlocked the door with a master key. Dust covered everything. A desk stood beneath a sheet. Old books lined one wall. Lily moved toward a cabinet while Alexander opened the desk drawer. Inside was a bundle of letters tied with a faded blue ribbon. Every envelope was addressed to Anna Carter. None had ever been mailed. Alexander held the first letter without opening it. Lily stood across from him in the dusty room, suddenly uncertain whether she wanted the answers she had spent years searching for. The envelopes were dated over a period of nearly 3 years. They belong to you, Alexander said. They were written by your father. To your mother. Neither moved. Finally, Lily untied the ribbon. The first letter revealed something neither had expected. Richard Hayes had not been Anna's lover. He had been her friend. Anna had reminded him of his younger sister, who had died years earlier, and helping her expose the corruption at Seabrook had become deeply personal. Richard wrote that Anna possessed more courage than anyone he had ever met. He also wrote repeatedly about Alexander, then 17 years old, and his fear that wealth was already isolating his son from ordinary life. Lily looked up. Your father worried about you. Alexander gave a humorless laugh. He had an unusual way of showing it. They continued reading. Richard had helped Anna relocate to Oregon after the criminal case. He paid for photography courses because she dreamed of becoming a photographer. Anna later returned the money in small installments, refusing to accept charity. That sounds like her, Lily whispered. One letter contained a photograph of Anna holding a baby. Lily, Richard had written on the back. Tell her courage is an inheritance too. Lily's eyes filled with tears. Alexander looked away to give her privacy. The final letter was different. Richard wrote that he had discovered something concerning Lily's biological father, and wanted Anna to contact him immediately. The letter had never been mailed. My father, Lily whispered. Alexander searched the desk and found no explanation. They took the documents downstairs, where Daniel was waiting with unexpected news. Richard's private legal files had been transferred after his death to a secure company archive in Los Angeles. Alexander could request them, but doing so would alert the Hayes family board, including his uncle Charles Hayes, who had managed Richard's affairs during his final illness. Then request them, Alexander said. Daniel hesitated. Charles specifically sealed those records. Alexander's expression hardened. I own the company. And Charles controls 3 board seats. Lily interrupted. I am not destroying your family over an old photograph. Alexander turned toward her. This stopped being only about your photograph when my father left letters he never mailed. Lily studied him. Why are you doing this? It was the question he had been avoiding since the moment he saw her. He could have answered that she deserved the truth. He could have said his father's secrets concerned him too. Both were true. Neither was the whole truth. Because I cannot seem to walk away from you, he said quietly. Lily's breath caught. Alexander immediately regretted revealing so much. We met yesterday. I am aware. You barely know me. I am aware of that too. Then how can you say something like that? Alexander looked directly into her eyes. Because yesterday I canceled a helicopter, moved a board meeting, spent half the night thinking about a woman who insulted my resort. And this morning I realized I was hoping the highway stayed closed. Lily stared at him. That is insane. Probably. For one dangerous second, neither looked away. Then Daniel's phone rang. He answered, listened, and turned pale. Alexander, we have a problem. What? Someone accessed Richard's sealed archive 30 minutes ago. Alexander's expression changed instantly. Who? Daniel swallowed. Your uncle Charles. Charles Hayes arrived at the resort that afternoon aboard a private helicopter Alexander had not invited. At 67, Charles still possessed the polished charm that had made him the public face of the Hayes family for decades. He hugged Alexander as if nothing were wrong, then looked at Lily with immediate recognition. Anna Carter's daughter, he said. Lily's stomach tightened. You knew my mother? Charles ignored the question and turned to Alexander. We need to speak privately. Anything you say can be said in front of Lily. Charles's smile disappeared. That would be a mistake. Then make it. They moved into Alexander's office. Charles placed a leather folder on the desk. Your father kept secrets because sometimes protecting a family requires silence. Alexander leaned back. That sounds like something people say immediately before revealing something terrible. Charles looked toward Lily. Your mother was involved with a man named Thomas Mercer. Lily had never heard the name. Charles explained that Mercer was a young accountant at Seabrook Lodge. He helped Anna uncover the stolen retirement funds. They fell in love, but shortly before Lily was born, Mercer disappeared. Anna believed he had abandoned her. Why? Lily asked. Charles hesitated. Because I paid him to disappear. Silence consumed the room. Alexander stood so quickly his chair struck the wall. You did what? Charles remained calm. Mercer had discovered financial irregularities connected to Hayes' investments. Richard wanted to expose them. I believed doing so would destroy the company our father built. So you threatened him? I offered him money. Lily's face went white. And he took it? Yes. Charles slid an old bank record across the desk. Thomas Mercer had received $200,000. Lily stared at the transaction date, only weeks before her birth. Every childhood question suddenly had an answer she did not want. Her father had been bought. Where is he now? She asked. I do not know. Alexander's anger sharpened. You came here because you accessed my father's files. Charles looked at him. I came because Richard eventually regretted protecting the company. He intended to find Mercer and tell Anna the truth. I stopped him. How? Charles did not answer. Alexander stepped closer. How did you stop him? I convinced him the scandal would hurt you. That answer struck Alexander harder than anything else. His father had carried the secret partly because he believed revealing it would destroy his son's inheritance. Lily quietly gathered the letters. I should leave. Alexander turned. Lily. This is your family. You are the reason we know any of it. Exactly. She walked out before he could stop her. Alexander found her 20 minutes later near the beach, camera beside her, watching waves crash against the rocks. "The highway reopened," she said. "I am leaving tonight." His chest tightened. "Because of Charles?" "Because I came here to photograph a wedding. 48 hours later, I know my father abandoned me for money, and your family helped make it happen. I am not my uncle." "I know. Then do not punish me for what he did." Lily looked at him. "This is not punishment. I need room to breathe." Alexander wanted to tell her not to go. He wanted to offer a car, a hotel, anything that could keep her close. Instead, he finally understood what respecting her required. "Okay," he said. Lily seemed surprised. He reached into his pocket and handed her a business card. "No pressure. No conditions. If you ever want the rest of the truth, call me." Lily took it. Their fingers touched. Neither spoke. That evening, Alexander watched her car disappear through the resort gates. For the first time since building his empire, he understood how powerless a billionaire could feel when the one thing he wanted could not be purchased. 3 weeks passed before Lily called Alexander. During that time, she returned to Oregon, photographed 4 weddings, edited thousands of images, and failed completely at pretending Hayes Crown Resort had been only another assignment. Alexander never contacted her. That surprised her more than constant messages would have. He had said he would give her space, and he did. Then a package arrived at Lily's apartment. It contained no expensive gift, only photocopies of documents and a handwritten note from Alexander. "I thought these belonged to you." Among the documents was a letter Thomas Mercer had written to Richard Hayes 17 years earlier. Lily read it 3 times. Thomas had not spent Charles's money. The entire $200,000 remained untouched in a trust account. Thomas wrote that Charles had threatened to frame Anna for financial crimes unless Thomas disappeared. He left to protect her, believing Richard would eventually expose Charles and reunite them. But Richard became ill, the truth remained buried, and Thomas apparently never returned. Lily called Alexander immediately. "Why did your uncle say my father took the money?" "Because technically he accepted the transfer. Charles omitted the part where he never used it." "Is Thomas alive?" "Yes." Lily stopped breathing. "Where?" "Port Townsend, Washington." "You found him?" "Daniel did." "Does he know about me?" Alexander was silent for a second. "He has known about you your entire life." Lily's anger returned. "Then why did he never contact me?" "I think you should ask him." 2 days later, Lily stood outside a small marine repair shop overlooking Puget Sound. Alexander waited in the car because she had asked to go inside alone. Thomas Mercer was 54, gray-haired, and thinner than she expected. When he saw Lily, he immediately knew who she was. Tears appeared in his eyes. "You look like Anna." Lily refused to cry. "Why did you leave us?" Thomas told her everything. Charles had threatened Anna with prison using fabricated financial records. Thomas had accepted the payment to make his departure look voluntary, then secretly turned evidence over to Richard. When Richard became sick, communication stopped. Thomas later tried contacting Anna, but every letter was returned. He believed she had chosen not to hear from him. "She thought you abandoned her," Lily whispered. Thomas covered his face. "I know that now. She died believing it." The pain on his face answered more than words could. Lily could not forgive 29 years in one afternoon. But when she finally left, she carried his phone number. Alexander was waiting beside the car in the rain. "Are you okay?" he asked. Lily shook her head. Then, without warning, she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him. Alexander froze before holding her gently. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For finding the truth even when it made your family look worse." Alexander looked down at her. "You mattered more." Lily pulled back. "You barely know me. You keep saying that." "Because it is true." "Then let me change it." He did not kiss her. He did not push. He simply waited. Lily looked at the man who could command boardrooms but had stood outside in the rain because she asked him to. "Dinner," she said. "One dinner." Alexander smiled. "I can work with that." Neither noticed the black sedan parked across the street. Inside, Charles Hayes watched them through the windshield. On the passenger seat was a legal document that could remove Alexander from control of Hayes Crown Hotels permanently. Alexander and Lily's first real date took place in a tiny seafood restaurant where the tables were covered with paper, and nobody cared that one of the richest hotel owners in America was sitting near the kitchen. Lily chose it deliberately. Alexander arrived without security, ordered the cheapest beer on the menu, and spent 2 hours asking about her life. She told him how photography had begun with her mother's old camera, how she loved weddings because people briefly stopped hiding what they felt, and how she still worried every month about rent despite working almost every weekend. Alexander told her he had been raised in hotel suites but rarely felt at home anywhere. "That may be the saddest billionaire sentence I have ever heard," Lily said. "There are rankings? I am developing them." He laughed. After dinner, they walked along the waterfront. Alexander stopped beneath a street lamp. "May I kiss you?" Lily smiled at the unexpected question. "You ask permission?" "I am learning that not everything should be treated like an acquisition." She stepped closer. "Then yes." Their first kiss was gentle, brief, and nothing like the dramatic moment Alexander had imagined. It was better because Lily chose it. The next morning, reality returned. Charles called an emergency board meeting and accused Alexander of violating his fiduciary responsibilities by reopening sealed family matters that could expose Hayes Crown to lawsuits. Several directors supported him. If Alexander continued investigating, Charles warned, the board would vote to remove him as chief executive. Lily learned about the threat through Daniel. "Stop," she told Alexander over the phone. "What?" "The investigation. Stop it." "No. You could lose your company because of me." "This is not because of you. It started when I showed up with that photograph." "No. It started when my family chose silence over truth." At the board meeting, Charles offered Alexander a deal. The company would preserve his position if he signed a confidentiality agreement, stopped assisting Thomas Mercer, and returned Richard's private records to the family archive. Alexander looked around the table where he had spent half his adult life. Hayes Crown Hotels was valued at more than $4 billion. His identity, reputation, and legacy were tied to it. Then he thought of Lily standing barefoot beside his pool, completely unimpressed by everything he owned. "No," he said. Charles stared at him. "Think carefully." "I have." "You would risk your father's company for a woman you met 3 weeks ago?" Alexander shook his head. "I am risking it because my father spent the end of his life regretting what this family protected. Lily simply made me brave enough to admit it." The board voted. Alexander was removed as chief executive by a narrow margin. News spread within hours. Reporters gathered outside Hayes Crown headquarters. Financial networks speculated that Alexander had suffered some kind of personal breakdown. He ignored them and flew back to Oregon. Lily opened her apartment door and stared at him. "Tell me you did not lose your company." "Technically, I still own most of my shares." "Alexander, I lost my job." "Because of this?" "Because I refused to become Charles." Lily's eyes filled with tears. "You idiot. That is not the reaction I hoped for." She grabbed his jacket and pulled him inside. "You should not have done that for me." Alexander touched her face. "I did it for myself." He kissed her forehead. "Falling in love with you just made it impossible to keep lying to myself." Lily looked up at him. This time she kissed him first. Neither knew that while they stood together in her small apartment, Thomas Mercer had found one final piece of evidence hidden for 23 years, evidence powerful enough not only to destroy Charles but to give Alexander his father's company back. Thomas Mercer arrived the following morning carrying a metal document case that had remained unopened in a bank vault for more than 2 decades. Richard Hayes had given him the key shortly before becoming seriously ill. Thomas had kept the case because Richard instructed him to open it only if Charles ever attempted to seize control of the company. Inside were original financial records, recorded conversations, and signed statements proving Charles had diverted millions of dollars through shell companies during the early expansion of Hayes Crown Hotels. Anna Carter had accidentally discovered one of those transactions while working at Seabrook Lodge. That was why Charles had been desperate to separate her from Thomas. Richard had eventually discovered the scheme and quietly spent years building a case against his own brother. Why did he never expose him? Alexander asked. Thomas looked at him sadly. Because Charles threatened you. Alexander went still. At 20, Alexander had been involved in the company's earliest expansion projects. Charles could have manipulated records to make him appear responsible for fraudulent transactions. Richard chose silence to protect his son while searching for a safer way to remove Charles. Then illness overtook him. Alexander stared at the documents. His father had not been perfect. He had allowed fear to delay justice. But the man Alexander had spent years believing cared only about business had sacrificed his own reputation to protect him. Lily sat beside Alexander and quietly took his hand. "What happens now?" she asked. Thomas looked at the evidence. Now Charles loses the one thing he spent his life protecting. Federal investigators received copies that afternoon. The Hayes Crown Board convened an emergency session 2 days later. Faced with evidence of fraud, coercion, and financial misconduct, Charles resigned before the board could remove him. Authorities announced an investigation, and several directors who had supported him quickly reversed their positions. Alexander was offered reinstatement as chief executive. He surprised everyone by refusing immediately. "Not under the old structure," he said. He demanded independent oversight, protections for whistleblowers, and an outside audit of every major historical transaction connected to Charles. Only after the board agreed did Alexander return. Reporters called it a corporate victory. Alexander did not feel victorious. He flew directly to Hayes Crown Resort and walked alone into room 214. Lily found him there sitting at his father's old desk. "You disappeared," she said. "Bad habit." She leaned against the doorway. "How does it feel to have your empire back?" "Different." "Good different." "Smaller." Lily frowned. Alexander looked around the room. "I spent years thinking this company was the largest thing in my life. Then a lost photographer wandered onto my terrace and somehow everything rearranged itself." Lily smiled. "Your signs are still terrible. I am planning a full investigation." She walked toward him. Alexander reached into the desk and removed the old photograph of Anna and Richard. "I think your mother came here so you could eventually find the truth. She did not send me here. A bride with a cancelled photographer did. Do not destroy the romance." Lily laughed. Alexander stood. "Stay a few days." "At the resort?" "Yes." "Is this another billionaire offer?" "No private jets. No penthouse gifts. No hidden contracts." "What are you offering?" Alexander took her hand. "Breakfast tomorrow." Lily pretended to consider it. "That sounds dangerously serious." "I am terrified." "Then yes." As the sun disappeared over the Pacific, Lily rested her head against his shoulder. Alexander had regained his company, cleared part of his father's name, and exposed the man who had manipulated his family for decades. Yet none of those victories felt as important as the woman standing beside him. The following morning, however, Lily received an email that threatened the future neither of them had yet been brave enough to discuss. She had been offered the photography opportunity of her lifetime, a 12-month assignment that would take her across Europe and keep her thousands of miles away from Alexander. Lily stared at the email for nearly an hour before telling Alexander. The assignment was everything she had worked toward. 12 months photographing destination weddings across France, Italy, Greece, and Spain for one of the world's largest wedding publications. The money would transform her business. The exposure could change her career permanently. Alexander read the offer and smiled. "You have to take it." Lily searched his face. "That quickly? Were you expecting me to ask you to stay?" "Maybe. Do you want me to?" She hesitated. "I do not know." Alexander closed the laptop. "Then I will make this easy. Go." Lily's expression fell slightly. He noticed. "Not because I do not want you here. I want you here more than I should after knowing you for such a short time. But if I ask you to give up something this important for me, someday you might wonder who you would have become if you had gone. And what happens to us?" Alexander smiled. "Airplanes exist." Lily laughed. "Spoken like a billionaire. Commercial airplanes exist too, apparently." She accepted the assignment. For the next year, their relationship unfolded across airports, video calls, missed connections, surprise weekends, and thousands of photographs. Alexander visited her in Florence and Paris. Lily returned to California whenever her schedule allowed. Distance did not make their relationship easy, but it made something clear. Neither needed the other to become smaller for the relationship to survive. Meanwhile, Hayes' Crown changed under Alexander's leadership. The company established employee protection programs and a foundation in Richard Hayes's name supporting hospitality workers facing financial hardship. Thomas Mercer slowly became part of Lily's life. Forgiveness did not happen overnight, but conversations became dinners, and dinners became something resembling family. 1 year after Lily left, she returned to Hayes Crown Resort for another wedding assignment. Alexander knew she was coming but deliberately stayed away from the ceremony. Near sunset, Lily finished photographing the bride and groom and walked toward the private infinity pool where everything had begun. Alexander was waiting beside the same marble staircase. Lily looked down at her shoes. Both heels survived this time. We improved the pathways. Finally. He walked toward her. Are you still lost? Lily smiled. Maybe. Good. Why is that good? Because the last time you got lost here, my entire life improved. Alexander reached into his jacket. Lily immediately narrowed her eyes. Alexander Hayes, if that is an enormous diamond. He laughed and pulled out a photograph instead. It had been taken by one of the wedding guests on the night they met. Lily stood barefoot with her camera, glaring at Alexander beside the pool. On the back he had written a date and 7 words. The day I found what money couldn't buy. Lily's eyes filled with tears. That is extremely cheesy. I had a year to practice. I expected better. There is something else. This time, Alexander lowered himself onto one knee. Lily covered her mouth. He held a simple ring, elegant rather than extravagant. I spent most of my life believing success meant controlling what happened next, he said. Then you walked into my resort by accident and taught me that the best thing that ever happened to me was something I never planned. Lily Carter, will you keep getting lost with me? She laughed through her tears. That may be the strangest proposal in history. Is that a yes? Lily looked at the man she had once mistaken for a hotel manager, the billionaire who had eventually risked his empire for truth, and then encouraged her to leave him temporarily, rather than sacrifice her dream. Yes. Alexander slipped the ring onto her finger, and stood as Lily wrapped her arms around him. Months later, their wedding took place at the same resort, but Lily insisted on one unusual detail. Near the entrance stood 2 framed photographs. The first showed Anna Carter beside Richard Hayes 23 years earlier. The second showed Lily barefoot beside Alexander on the night they met. Beneath them was no explanation. None was necessary. One photograph had carried a secret across generations. The other captured the beginning of a love neither money nor planning could have created. Alexander Hayes owned resorts around the world, but the photograph he kept on his desk for the rest of his life was not of a luxury hotel, a corporate victory, or a billionaire's achievement. It was simply a lost wedding photographer, barefoot beside a swimming pool, looking at him as though he were nothing special at all.